The moving truck was still idling when my youngest jumped down from the cab, laughing, pointing at the front door like it was a prize we'd already won. Cardboard boxes stacked along the driveway. Sun high. Clear day. Faces visible. No shadows hiding anything. This was supposed to be the first quiet moment of our new life. Then the screaming cut through it. A black SUV skidded to a stop at the curb. A middle-aged white woman stepped out before the engine even died, heels sharp against the pavement, finger already in the air like a weapon. 2 police cruisers rolled in behind her. Doors opened. Radios crackled. Stop unloading. The word hit harder than the sirens. She didn't look at the house. She looked at me. You are trespassing. This property now belongs to the HOA. One of the officers moved closer, hand hovering near his belt. Sir, step away from the vehicle. If you continue, you will be arrested. My wife froze mid-step, a box slipping from her hands. It hit the ground and burst open, kids' books, a framed photo, pieces of our life spilling onto the driveway. Neighbors' doors opened. Phones came out. A circle formed without anyone saying a word. I asked one question. Calm. Slow. On what authority? The woman laughed, short, sharp, confident. We expanded the HOA boundaries. County approved it. This is HOA land now. An officer cut in before I could respond. Sir, do not argue. This is your final warning. My oldest tugged my sleeve. His voice shook. Dad, is this not our home? The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to sting. You people always think paperwork makes you owners. The officer turned to my wife when she tried to speak. Ma'am, step back. Cameras were recording. Neighbors whispered. Someone muttered, just follow the rules. The HOA president smiled like this was already over. I looked at my family. Boxes on the ground. Strangers deciding where we could stand. Guns, badges, and paperwork I hadn't even been allowed to see. I nodded once. Okay, I said. We're leaving. The smile on her face said she thought she'd won. And that's when I realized. This wasn't about rules. This was about power. Before we continue, drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if you believe justice should protect people in their own homes, not threaten them with badges and fear, hit like and subscribe. That house wasn't a sudden purchase. It was the end of a long road. I'm a middle-aged black man who grew up being taught one thing above all else: keep your records, keep your head down, and do things the right way. The land we built on had been in my family for generations. It wasn't something I found online or bought in a rush. It came to me through inheritance, backed by deeds older than most of the houses in that neighborhood. When we decided to build, we did everything by the book. Permits approved. Surveys completed. County stamps on every page. Inspections passed without a single violation. No shortcuts. No favors. Just patience and paperwork. The neighborhood around us had changed while we were building. New developments. New rules. A newly formed homeowners association had appeared nearby, run by people who liked order, signs, and control. But our land was never part of it. We never signed HOA papers. Never agreed to their authority. Never owed them anything. To us, this move-in day wasn't about defiance. It was about finally coming home. We had no idea that someone else had already decided that home no longer belonged to us. The moment I agreed to leave, the tone changed, but not in the way you'd expect. The HOA president's smile didn't fade. It sharpened. Like she'd just proven something. She stepped closer to the officers, lowering her voice but making sure everyone could still hear. Make sure this address is flagged, she said. If he comes back, I want him detained. One of the officers nodded without question. I asked again, still calm, still controlled. Can I at least see the document that says this land belongs to the HOA? She waved her hand like the question wasn't worth answering. You'll get it when your lawyer requests it. Right now, you're trespassing. Trespassing. On my own driveway. My wife bent down to gather the books that had spilled from the box. An officer stepped forward immediately. Ma'am, don't touch anything. They're my children's books, she said quietly. Step away, he repeated. That was when the neighbors started whispering louder. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked satisfied, like they were watching rules finally being enforced on someone they didn't think belonged there. Phone stayed raised. No one intervened. The HOA president crossed her arms. We warned him during construction, she said loudly. He ignored us. Now he wants to play victim. That wasn't true. Not once had we received a warning. Not a letter. Not a notice. Nothing. But truth didn't matter in that moment. Authority did. One officer asked for my ID. I handed it over. He studied it longer than necessary, then looked back at the house. If you step foot on that property again today, he said, you will be arrested for criminal trespass. I glanced at the front door. The one we'd chosen together. The one my kids had argued over paint colors for. The one my wife had cleaned twice even though no one had lived there yet. The HOA president leaned in closer, her voice dropping to something colder. Consider this your warning. People who don't follow HOA rules don't last here. My youngest started crying. Not loud, just confused sobs that cut deeper than shouting ever could. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a test. A show of force. A message to everyone watching about who had control in that neighborhood. I took a breath. Looked at my family. Looked at the boxes still half unloaded. Then I did the one thing they weren't expecting. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't resist. I nodded once. Let's go, I told my family. As we pulled away, I saw the HOA president standing in the driveway, arms crossed, satisfied. The officers followed her back to their cars without another word. They thought silence meant surrender. They didn't know silence was just the beginning. We didn't speak much on the drive away. The truck followed behind us, boxes rattling softly like a reminder of everything we'd just been told we didn't own. My wife stared straight ahead, jaw tight, holding it together for the kids. The silence felt heavier than the threats had. When we finally pulled over, she broke. That's our house, she said, voice cracking. How can they just take it? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew something she didn't yet. Anger was exactly what they expected from me. Noise. Resistance. A mistake they could write up in a report. So I stayed quiet. That night, after the kids were asleep, I opened the file cabinet I'd carried with me through every move for over 20 years. Thick folders. Yellowed edges. County stamps faded but still visible. I laid everything out on the table, deeds, plats, surveys, inheritance documents going back further than the HOA president had probably lived in that state. There it was. Clear as daylight. Our land sat outside the HOA boundary. Always had. Always would, unless someone decided to redraw lines they had no authority to touch. The next morning, I called a lawyer. By the time I finished explaining, he stopped me mid-sentence. Bring everything in, he said. Today. When I spread the documents across his desk, he leaned back slowly, exhaled, and shook his head. They don't own a single inch of this, he said. Not even close. I felt something shift, not relief yet, but focus. We filed for an emergency stay that afternoon. The HOA wasn't notified right away. The court moved faster than they expected. Within hours, a temporary order blocked any enforcement action against my property. But I didn't go back. Not yet. Instead, I waited. The HOA president sent letters. certified, threatening, full of legal language meant to scare, fines, violations, claims of community authority. She CC'd the police department, tried to build a paper trail that made her look legitimate. My lawyer smiled when he read them. She's panicking, he said. People who are right don't do this. Then came the hearing. The courtroom was small, quiet, and nothing like the chaos outside my driveway. The HOA president walked in confident, dressed sharp, binder thick with color-coded tabs. She smiled at the officers sitting behind her like allies. She spoke first. She told the judge the HOA had expanded boundaries, that the land had been absorbed into the community, that I had been warned, that police intervention had been necessary for community safety. She said it all without once looking at me. Then my lawyer stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just placed one document after another on the bench. Original deeds, county surveys, recorded inheritance transfers, boundary maps stamped and signed long before the HOA even existed. A county official was called, sworn in, asked one question. Does this property belong to the HOA? The answer was immediate. No. The room shifted. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, flipping through the pages slowly. Too slowly for comfort. The HOA president's pen stopped moving. Her smile faded. Ma'am, the judge said, looking directly at her for the first time, on what legal authority did you claim this land? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her binder again like the answer might be hiding there. The judge waited. And waited. Finally, he spoke again, calm, precise, final. You attempted to seize private property without jurisdiction. You involved law enforcement without verifying ownership. That is a serious matter. Her face drained of color. Outside the courtroom, reporters had gathered. Word had spread faster than she'd expected. Cameras turned toward me, microphones raised. One asked why I hadn't fought back that day in the driveway. I answered honestly. Because truth doesn't need noise, I said. It needs time. And time was finally on our side. The courtroom was tense, but nothing compared to the silence we'd faced on move-in day. I walked in, calm, every step deliberate, holding my head high while my family followed behind. The kids clutched my wife's hand, eyes wide, aware this was important but not fully understanding why. The HOA president was already there, standing tall, binder in hand, a smirk playing across her face as if she'd won before the trial began. Behind her, 2 police officers sat, straight-backed, expressions unreadable. Their presence was meant to intimidate, a reminder of what they thought they controlled. The judge entered, gavel in hand, and the room instantly quieted. Everyone took their seats. The judge's gaze swept the courtroom like a spotlight, landing on the HOA president first. Madam, he began, voice firm but measured, explain the legal basis for claiming ownership of this property. She smiled, opening her binder as if the weight of dozens of documents would convince the court instantly. Your Honor, the HOA boundaries were expanded with county approval. The property in question was incorporated into the community, and the owner was given repeated warnings. She paused to glance at me, confident, almost smug. Repeated warnings were ignored, making police intervention necessary. The room fell silent. My youngest shifted nervously. My wife squeezed my hand. I took a deep breath. The truth didn't need dramatics, only evidence. My lawyer rose, placing the first document carefully on the bench. Your Honor, I submit the original deed, dating back 3 generations. The property has been in my client's family since the early 1900s. Attached are county surveys confirming the boundaries. At no point has the HOA held any claim. He placed the next folder. Plat maps, survey stamps, official county certifications. The judge flipped through them slowly, studying each seal, each line. The HOA president's smirk faltered, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her binder. Then the county surveyor was sworn in. Asked one simple question. Does the HOA legally own this property? No, came the reply. Clear. Firm. Absolute. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The HOA president's face drained of color. Her eyes darted from the surveyor to the judge, then to me. Your Honor, she said, voice slightly higher than usual, there must be some mistake. These documents, the expansion was legal. The judge raised a hand. Silence returned. Madam, ownership of private property is determined by the law and by proper documentation. Your claims are unfounded. Attempting to seize this property, involving law enforcement without verifying ownership, constitutes an abuse of authority. Her shoulders slumped. Her binder, once a shield, suddenly looked like a prop. The police officers behind her exchanged awkward glances. The courtroom, once tense with anticipation, now hummed with the satisfaction of justice edging closer. My lawyer laid out the final evidence, letters from previous HOA notices, all blank, with no warnings ever delivered. County records proving continuous family ownership. Signed affidavits from neighbors confirming the land's history. The room seemed to lean forward with every piece presented. The judge paused, looking directly at her. You attempted to claim property that was never yours. Your actions caused undue stress and fear to the occupants. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Any future attempts to interfere with the property will result in immediate penalties. A silence followed. Not the oppressive silence of the driveway confrontation, but the quiet of a verdict that shattered arrogance. The HOA president slumped into her chair, disbelief and humiliation mixing on her face. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras flashed, and the officers shifted uncomfortably. My wife exhaled, leaning slightly on my shoulder. Our children looked up, understanding that the fight wasn't over just because the confrontation was past, the truth had finally been recognized. As the court adjourned, a final piece of justice was revealed. The HOA president had falsified some internal documents to appear legitimate. The judge noted this and promised a review. Suddenly, the magnitude of her recklessness became clear. Not only had she attempted to steal property, she had risked legal and criminal consequences for herself and her officers. Walking out, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, one finally asked me, "Why didn't you confront them that day in the driveway?" I looked at my kids, at my wife, and finally back at the cameras. Because truth doesn't need noise, I said. It only needs proof. Outside, neighbors murmured in disbelief, many recording the moment. Social media would be alive with this story by the evening. The same street that had witnessed humiliation now witnessed vindication. The twist wasn't just in winning the court case. It was in showing everyone that intimidation, badges, and false authority crumble when faced with documented truth. And that realization, more than any ruling, struck hardest of all. The courtroom had cleared most of its spectators, but the tension lingered like a storm cloud. I stayed seated with my family, feeling a quiet steadiness that only comes from knowing you've done everything right. Outside, word had already started to spread. Neighbors, local journalists, even the county officials were whispering about the shocking turn of events. Inside, the HOA president sat frozen, clutching her now useless binder like it could somehow rewrite the truth. The judge called the final session to order. His gavel struck once, sharp, and silence fell like a heavy curtain. Every eye turned to him. Having reviewed the submitted evidence, testimonies, and official records, the judge began, his voice even but unyielding, "This court finds that the HOA has no legal claim over the property in question. The actions taken by the HOA, including involving law enforcement to intimidate the occupants, were without authority and constitute an abuse of power." The room seemed to hold its breath. The words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. Effective immediately, the judge continued, "Any attempt by the HOA or its representatives to interfere with the property will result in immediate penalties, including fines and potential criminal charges. The occupants are free to return to their home without threat or harassment." This court stands in protection of lawful property ownership and the rights of citizens against unjust authority. The HOA president's face had drained of every hint of color. Her shoulders slumped as though the weight of her arrogance had physically struck her down. The officers behind her shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other, the realization dawning that their involvement in the intimidation could have consequences. The courtroom, once a theater of tension and fear, now seemed like a stage set for exposure. Reporters outside had begun broadcasting live updates. Cameras followed our family as we walked through the courthouse doors. Microphones thrust toward us, flashes erupting in rapid succession. Questions came from all sides. How did you stay calm? Did you expect the court to rule in your favor? What will you do next? I took a deep breath, looking at my children first. Their wide eyes, reflecting a mix of awe and relief, grounded me. My wife clutched my hand, tears streaming silently, pride and relief interwoven in her expression. I turned to the microphones, my voice steady but firm. We followed the law. We trusted the truth. And that is what protected us. This isn't just about one home. It's about standing up when people misuse power to intimidate others. Truth and evidence always win when you refuse to be silenced. Outside, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Neighbors who had once watched passively now nodded, whispering their disbelief. Social media clips were already circulating, showing the moment the HOA president slumped into her seat, defeated, her officers looking helpless. The public humiliation was complete, a stark reversal of power that could have lasting consequences for the HOA's reputation. Back inside, the court clerk finalized the paperwork. Fines were officially documented, penalties imposed, and a cease and desist order formally issued against the HOA. The judge's remarks were clear: any future attempts to overstep authority would not be tolerated. Even the police chief had to acknowledge that their participation, however passive, would be reviewed internally. For my family, it was more than a legal victory. It was restoration of dignity. The same driveway that had once been a stage for fear and intimidation now symbolized justice. My children ran their hands along the fence, exploring the yard, their laughter cutting through the tension that had hung over our home like a shadow. My wife paused at the doorway, looking back at the street, knowing that this fight was over, for now. The final lesson of the day was simple but profound: power without law and truth is fragile. The HOA had tried to assert control through threats, intimidation, and abuse of authority, but when confronted with proof and persistence, their dominance crumbled. The neighborhood that had witnessed humiliation now witnessed vindication. And in that collapse, justice wasn't just served, it was undeniable, visible, and lasting. As we stood together in the sunlight outside our home, I realized that victory wasn't loud or chaotic. It was quiet, measured, and backed by truth. The HOA had lost their illusion of power, and we had reclaimed not just our land, but the peace and safety every family deserves. The collapse was complete, and this time, there was no way for them to recover. The street felt different when we finally returned. The boxes, once abandoned and scattered in fear, were now carefully lined up, ready to be unpacked. Sunlight fell evenly on the driveway, no shadows hiding the truth. The same neighbors who had watched silently during our confrontation now looked on in quiet acknowledgement. Some nodded, some whispered congratulations, and a few even waved. The weight of humiliation had lifted, replaced by a subtle, undeniable respect. We stepped onto the porch together. My children ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood, filling the spaces that had been tense just days before. My wife paused at the doorway, taking a deep breath, letting herself feel relief for the first time. She turned to me, eyes glistening, and said, "We're finally home." Inside, every room held a sense of victory. The furniture, the pictures, the little touches that made this house ours again, all stood as proof that truth had its place here. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Every corner whispered resilience, every wall held history, every step on the floor carried the weight of justice earned. From across the street, the HOA president watched. Her car sat idle, her posture slumped. The same police officers who had once tried to intimidate us had left, aware that the court's ruling and public attention had stripped them of any authority in this matter. It was over. I gathered my family in the living room, holding them close. The fight had been long, tense, and exhausting, but justice had prevailed. We hadn't shouted. We hadn't rushed. We had waited, prepared, and relied on what was ours by right. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. They had tried to stop us at the door, to make us question our place in the world. But they didn't know, the door was built not just on land, but on truth, history, and persistence. And no power on earth could take that away from us. We were home. Fully. Freely. And finally, we could breathe.